Welcome to FounderLine, the show where we answer your questions about startups. I'm your host, Joe Beninato. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. Our goal with FounderLine is to provide a forum where people who are interested in startups can get their questions answered. So you might be a startup founder who's thinking about starting a company. You might be someone who's already started a company and encountering a situation that you need some help with. You might be thinking about joining a company and want to get some advice about how to evaluate the opportunity. Whatever your situation is, we're here to help. This is a live show, and so in order for this to work, we need you to participate. So you can do that multiple ways. You can call us. The number is toll-free, 1-844-4FOUNDER, and that's 1-844-436-8633. You can email us. The email address is help@founderline.com. And you can also tweet questions to us. The Twitter handle is @FounderLine. With that, let's get started. Our guest today is Ann Miura-Ko, who's the co-founding partner at FLOODGATE Fund. She's invested in some great companies, including ModCloth, Refinery29, and Lyft. She's also a lecturer at Stanford School of Engineering, which is where I think we originally met.
We met there.
So, Ann, thank you for joining us. Welcome to FounderLine. So, I was trying to think back. It was MSNE
273.
Yeah. So I was a mentor, and you were one of the muckety mucks. Yeah, exactly. And that was fun. I mean, that was a great situation. So, usually. Before we take questions from the audience, we usually spend a few minutes just chatting, and I ask you a couple of questions just to get you warmed up. So, what I found interesting is you're a Palo Alto born and bred, right? So
native here, yeah.
Grew up here, Pali High, and then went off to Yale and came back for your PhD at Stanford. So you've lived and breathed Silicon Valley for a long time, in a way that many of us who are from other areas haven't, and now spending your time on FLOODGATE and Stanford. So maybe tell us what you're up to, what keeps you busy, other than when you're running around chasing your kids all the time.
My 3 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I co-founded FLOODGATE in 2008. It was an interesting time, financial crisis happening.
Oh, no.
Angel investing not really happening at that time, and so a great time for me to get started in the business. And 6 years later, that's sort of my focus now, and it's been my life. Back in 2008, I was still finishing up my PhD. In 2010, in 2009 rather, I had my second child. I finished up my PhD in that same year, I think 6 weeks after I gave birth. And so since then, things feel a lot more quiet and much more contained.
You're such an overachiever. You make the rest of us look lame in comparison.
No way. But it's been so now I get to focus on just working with companies, and it's been nice because now I've seen some companies go from super early stage to now high growth. Like Lyft is a great example of that.
Yeah.
We're still investing in our core thesis, which is we believe in companies before everyone else does, and we invest in them and work with them and spend time with those founders. And it's just a sector of investing that I really love.
Awesome. And then what about Stanford? So are you still doing
Stanford?
Yeah.
So last year I taught actually 2 quarters out of the 3, and so it was pretty busy. And then this year, I'm going to be doing more of an experimental class, which is more of a pop-up class, where I want to be talking about hunting thunder lizards. So essentially trying to figure out what companies look like that end up being these huge, legendary businesses, what they look like in the very early days, because that's when we see them, right? They always look a little bit crazier than they do later on, and trying to explain to the students that it's not so logical, right? A lot of this is just based on gut and where you think things might go.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Well, and you guys started back in 2008, and at that time, you sensed that something was changing, right? That the venture capital world was going through a transition, and you've seen it all throughout your life. So maybe talk about what it is that you saw at that time, and then how it's evolved, which the pace seems to be accelerating the last 6 years with everything that's going on now. But maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my venture capital history actually goes back to 2001. So before my PhD, I worked at Charles River Ventures out on the East Coast. And my second day of work there was 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And so I've seen this cycle before where it was not the heyday of venture capital, but rather really when things screeched to a halt. And so my view of venture capital was very much colored by what I'd seen during those 2 years. So when I came back to get my PhD, part of my intention was not to set up myself for a career in venture capital, but rather to get started in a high-tech startup company. And I was going to be a founder. And when I reached out to Mike Maples, my co-founding partner at FloodGate, my intention was actually to see deal flow so that I could get a sense of what was going on in the real world.
And he was just investing as an angel at that point,
He was an angel at that
No fund or anything.
That's right. Well, he had a small $10 million fund that he had gotten. And so I reached out to Mike. I had done a PhD in computer security and math modeling. And I said, I'm thinking of starting a company in the space. Can I just come in and see some of your deal flow? And Mike was just extraordinarily generous. And you see this in Silicon Valley. People just kind of open up their doors.
Yeah.
And he did this for me. And a few months into this, I would just go in every Wednesday and he would hold what he called unpartner meetings. And we would sit around a table. Sometimes we'd invite other angels in and we'd talk about companies that he was looking at. And I would just sort of give him my honest feedback. And then a few months into that, he calls me as I'm driving up to Tahoe and he says, I have this great idea. You should drop out of your PhD program. I just raised this fund. It's not a venture-backed startup like you're looking for, but now we could call it a backed venture startup. Let's go. And, and I think back to it now, Mike was crazy to give me that offer, right? I'm a PhD candidate at Stanford with no track record for investing. He actually has a track record at this point. He's invested in Twitter. He's invested in a bunch of companies that are doing really well.
Yeah.
And he probably had a bunch of people he could have worked with. And he picks this woman coming in at Stanford without a PhD, still hasn't finished it, without a proven track record, and decides to take a bet on me. And so it was in 2008, May, that I started working with him. And back then, YC, you'd go to Y Combinator and there's 20 or 30 people in the audience.
Yeah.
It's in some place in Mountain View, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And like 8 companies, not like 70 or 80.
Yeah, and each one has 15 minutes to present, right?
Yeah, it got shorter very quickly.
So and so it was just a very different atmosphere, right? 2008 also is when all the banks are collapsing. And so my parents at the same time were saying, let me get this straight. You're not finishing your PhD right now. You're slowing that down. You're starting a financial services business. And all we are hearing about is banks are collapsing. So how is this a smart idea? But at the same time, I'm seeing all these entrepreneurs who need capital, but in a different way than they did in the past.
Yep.
And I'd seen this at Stanford as well. When I started my PhD in 2003, commoditized hardware like blade servers were really sort of cutting edge. But by the time 2008 rolls around, you have actually cloud services coming into fruition, and AWS, and everything is starting to happen. And so the expense of actually starting a company literally had collapsed.
Yep.
And so you could see the need for capital collapsing. And so there are just a line of entrepreneurs out the door asking for $500,000. And Mike is telling me the story of $500,000 is the new $5 million. And because it used to be $5 million is what got you started.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, I was also teaching with Steve Blank. And I remember Eric Ries was also starting to think about these ideas around lean startup, and they would come into our office and we'd riff on these ideas. And it became really clear that there was something happening where you could actually give an entrepreneur not $5 million, but $500,000, and they could prove a lot. And that it wasn't technical risk that was keeping these guys back,
Yeah.
It was market risk.
Yeah.
And that insight really changed everything. And so I felt like when I was justifying this to my parents, to my friends, to my husband, why this felt like the right idea, even though not a lot of people were doing it, it was just, there were a lot of different market forces at work. And I imagine it's sort of what entrepreneurs must feel when they're getting started in a business. You're seeing this opportunity, you feel like no one else sees it, and you have to go after it.
Awesome. Well, it's great. I mean, you guys were there at the beginning. So we had Jeff Clavier on not too long ago, and I mean, he told a story of like what it was like 2004 when that was going on, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thought he was crazy. So no, it's pretty amazing what's happening, and the access to capital and just the velocity that can be achieved very quickly with not much money. I still remember the days you're taking $5 million and it goes to Sun and Oracle, like most of it, right?
Yeah.
And maybe $1 million for salaries, right?
That's right.
And so luckily those days are gone.
Yeah.
So right now, on a more serious topic, there's quite a bit of discussion in the Valley around sexism in Silicon Valley and like what's going on. And I mentioned to you, we had Heidi Roizen here last week and had a great discussion around it. You've been in both the academic as well as the working world, both operating as a consultant as well as a venture capitalist now. So, what have you experienced or seen, and what do you think we as an industry can do about it? I think it's an important topic to get out there and keep talking about.
Yeah, and to be perfectly honest, from a personal perspective, I've been very lucky that I haven't faced a lot of the issues that I hear women talking about. And I've been in very male-dominated environments. I think that the place where I got lucky is that I've always worked with incredible male mentors who actually wouldn't allow that to happen, right? And I also made sure that I wasn't put in that kind of position as well.
Yeah.
But I think that there's also two different kinds of sexism. People sort of I think they mix and match.
Okay.
And I would say one is sort of this, there's a whole discussion around sort of sexual harassment that happens. And I think that's very different though from the sexism that people talk about where women are not included in discussions or women are left out of professional situations, right? And I think those are two very separate issues, and I don't want to mix those two together.
Got it.
I think that on the professional front, one of the things that was a lucky break for me is that when I got started with FLOODGATE, we naturally had gender neutrality, right? And so because it's Mike and me, we aren't doing anything, and we were both married at the time. It's just seems like we wouldn't do anything that would jeopardize those relationships. And so as a result of that, we always had, when we did events together, it was with our spouses and with our kids. And so everything was naturally neutralized from that perspective. Yeah. And as we've grown the firm, actually, we've added more women to the organization. And what I found with that is that, in fact, there's been some studies done where they say there's this rule of two, right? And that is that if you have two women in a situation where it's fairly male-dominated, all of a sudden, that woman's voice, when one woman speaks up, it's not the female voice. It's just a person in that room because there's actually two of them. And in the same way that I found that, when I was coding on projects, when I was an undergrad in a robotics competition that I was taking part in, there were actually two of us, right? And so two women in this group. And it made it so that we weren't female voices in a discussion, rather we were part of a team. On the other hand, when you are the only woman, it is very isolating at times, right? And I think that's where both startup companies, professional organizations can make a real effort to think about, okay, we're having this discussion or even this meeting or this meetup, and there's only, one woman in the room. How do we make it so that there's at least two?
Yeah.
In any situation.
That's good.
And I think that automatically starts to neutralize things. On the sexual harassment piece, and I think that's a much heavier topic. That was something that I saw from the sidelines when I was in Japan a lot, and I remember colleagues of mine would actually tell me stories of things that were happening to them. And I remember at one point I called my mom and I said, this never is happening to me. It's just very strange because in this professional environment, practically every woman my age was getting sexually harassed. And she said, and actually one of my work colleagues said, well, they're scared of you, right? And
in what way?
And I think, and I actually tried to dig into that because I thought it was an interesting point. I was and I in a lot of situations I can be perceived as just very serious. And so back then, especially when I was really young, I was in my 20s and I felt like I had something to prove. When there was a situation and everyone was going out and they were getting drunk, I just wouldn't do it, right? I would also take the perspective, and I can't say that this is fair, right? A lot of women will say, well, that's not fair because other guys don't have to think about it. But it's sort of the reality, and I just didn't want to be in that situation. As I also got engaged and I became married, the other lens that I took to it was, if in that situation my husband would have been at all uncomfortable, right, then it's not okay. Yeah. Or if anyone just happened to stop by and see me in a situation and they thought, that's not cool either. Yep. And that feeling actually got stronger as I became a mother as well, right? And so I make a real strong effort that there's never any sort of gray area for me. And I try to look at it through that lens, and I think there's always been clarity for me. But it's not fair because, other guys can put themselves in that situation and potentially create closer relationships with other people. Yep. But I'd rather just not have a gray area. And I think that's hard, and sometimes what is a gray area and what's not is very unclear. And that's where it gets really, really tricky. Yep. But for women, it's just a really hard and it's a hard line to draw, and I don't see any really great solutions, except you really have to be proactive in protecting yourself and then walking away when a situation arises.
Which is not easy. I mean, even for a man, I remember distinctly 2 situations at South by Southwest where I said, look, we are executives in a company and this is not cool, and I am removing myself and getting out of here. I don't want to get wasted with everybody else. Like we have to be responsible. And by the way, I have a meeting at 8:00 tomorrow morning. Yeah. But not the same as what many women go through. But I think you just kind of have to look at it, as you said earlier. Like, what happens if someone walks by and sees whatever it is? Yeah. And just try and keep out of it. So
but my partner actually had he's obviously he's a guy, and he used to tell me when he first started Motive, the CEO said that he had a no divorce rule, right? And so so at these trade shows, that when dessert was done at the dinner, there was no drinking and dancing afterwards. They would all go back to their rooms.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, Las Vegas is the downfall of many a startup, not even an established company executives. So not a good place. So all right, well, great topic that obviously needs more conversation. Why don't we dive in and see if we can help some of these people who have questions here? And once again, if you want to reach us, you can call us 844-4FOUNDER. You can email to help@founderline.com, or you can tweet to @founderline. So here's a tweet from Hong Kwan. I don't know if you know Hong, but Ann, have you found any Thunder Lizard hardware startups yet? So I have a feeling I know what he's hinting at. I think he might have one, but explain Thunder Lizard for those who don't know what that is.
So Thunder Lizard is actually something that my partner Mike made up a long time ago, actually. It's inspired by Godzilla.
Yep.
And so Godzilla is hatched from radioactive atomic eggs. He swims across the Pacific Ocean and appears in Tokyo Harbor with an attitude, and then proceeds to, eat trains and stomp on buildings and tear up trees.
Yep.
And that visualization was very powerful to us in figuring out, when we look at the top 15 companies in any given year, those companies appear to be thunder lizards in their various industries. And so it's just sort of a clarifying visualization of these amazing entrepreneurs that we get to work with.
Got it. And do you guys do hardware or mostly software?
We've done mostly software, but we have had a few hardware deals. So one company of mine that I would put in that category is actually a neuroscience company. It's called Inscopix.
Oh, never heard of it.
It's pretty under the radar, but it was a Stanford PhD student who came to me, and he had already pre-sold 35 of these devices. And what it is it's a microscope that is attached to a mouse's head, and it literally can read the mind of the mouse. And you attach it to a USB port, and you could visualize what's going on inside the brain of a mouse on your laptop.
A USB mouse, as it were.
A live USB mouse.
Wow, that's really crazy.
Yeah.
So sold this to be used for research purposes?
Mostly research purposes today, but he's really transforming the kind of data that you can actually even acquire and understand about the way the brain operates, right? It's the equivalent to the genome sequencing revolution that happened. He's able to do that in the brain now.
That's really cool.
And so that's one company that, even though it was a hardware company, he was profitable last year and has still yet to touch the cash that I gave him.
Wow.
So.
All right, Hong. Well, now you got to make your pitch. So you gotta get in touch with her, and we'll give out her Twitter handle in a little bit. We have a call from one of our regulars, Larry from Yuba City. So let's see if we can get Larry on the line. Larry, are you with us?
I am. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how are you?
Great
Welcome.
Show. So thanks for taking my call.
Sure. Do you have a question for Ann?
So I do, and it's I'm going to start with an example. So, every startup CEO wears many hats, and I do coding and testing as well as other, administrative things. And in looking at an opportunity, I'm trying to figure out what are the most important parameters. So I want to give you an example. So I'm speaking at 2 national conferences in the fall that are in my time zone. I can travel to and back the same day, and both topics are closely related to our product. I've been invited to participate in a think tank discussion at an East Coast university on a topic that's more peripheral to our product. So on the cost side, I see time costs, dollar costs, and opportunity costs. Plus, I'll have to stay overnight. I'll have to endure the time zone changes there and back. But in return, I might expand my network with other national experts. I might possibly find partners or advisory board members, and there might be an entree to funding. So I know there's no, formula for deciding whether or not to go. So my more general question is, what do you both see as the key parameters to be considered when deciding how to allocate the CEO's time among all the different obligations and opportunities?
Wow, great question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So the way I think about it is, in any startup, there's really a couple of key questions that you're really trying to answer in any given moment. And if you have, 10, 20, 30, you really need to narrow it down to 1 or 2. And if you're making great progress on those 2, then you can potentially start to expand it out. But if you have fundamental questions that you're answering, you should focus all of your activities on those 1 or 2 things. I really think that in general, startups have this problem that they're trying to hedge when they really should be focusing. And the single weapon that every startup has that most other organizations, especially the large companies and incumbents, don't have, is really that ability to focus on the problem. And if you start to hedge your bets and look at a lot of other problems that aren't core to your business at that moment, then you're losing one of the distinct advantages you have as a startup.
Yeah, it's always a tough question, right? Because I used to look at my days and go, all right, what is going to move the needle the most today, and where can I apply my time and energy? And it turns out that actually one of the best uses of your time is recruiting, right?
Yep.
Like probably more than half of your time should be going toward leveraging your time so that you can get more people. And
that's right.
Which is always hard when you're, I don't know if Larry's funded or unfunded, but sometimes you don't have the cash, and so recruiting is a moot point because you're kind of at that earliest stage. But the focus point is dead on. Like you just gotta pick those things and go do the things that are gonna help you the most.
Yeah.
So that's great. So Larry, hope that helps. I think we lost you there on the connection, but. Worst case, it'll be on the video when that gets posted. So we have an email here from Michael. It says, you only consider business plans through referrals that you trust. I don't know, is that on your website or something like that?
It might be on our website, yeah.
Why is that? How can somebody with a great product idea and great credentials get noticed?
Yeah, so part of the problem actually is just the fact that we ingest so much, right? So just to give people a sense of, this is probably true for most venture capitalists, in any given week, we have about 150 inbound emails or phone calls of business plans coming through our door. And Mike and I, between the two of us, have a capacity to meet with at most 20, probably closer to 10. And then we are each making an investment maybe once every quarter, probably closer to 3 a year.
Okay.
And so just the funnel dynamics are such that it's very hard to get through.
Yep.
And one of the reasons that we say, come through someone that we know is that some of these people are really scrappy in how they find a contact or a mentor or someone who can actually help make those introductions. And it's just a way for us to have a second pass filter.
Yep.
We have, though, found some companies that have just sort of come through either just when I was speaking someplace, someone met with me, and I just became really intrigued. I've had meetings like that in the past. And also our network is very, very large, right? And so I feel like it's not so limited when we say, try to find someone who knows us, who can at least say, hey, I think this is a really interesting idea.
Yeah, no, I think it's a necessity, right?
Right.
Like if you got to every response, you would be doing nothing else probably, and you wouldn't even be able to get to all those.
Yeah.
So, well, believe it or not, we're about halfway through, so take a deep breath. And I'm going to thank our sponsors for a moment here. So, we do this show every week, and we couldn't do it without the support of our amazing sponsors, Ustream and Orrick. First, I'd like to thank Brad Hunstable and the team over at Ustream. Since day one, they've been great to work with. In fact, we had some stuff we were talking about this week. If you're thinking about doing a meeting, that you want to broadcast live or some sort of event or whatever it might be, and you need some streaming technology, definitely go check out Ustream, and you can go to ustream.tv and you can find out more. I'd also like to thank Mitch Zuklie and the team over at Orrick. Mitch is the chairman and CEO there. I've known him for probably 12, 14 years now. We work together on multiple companies. Great guy. I always tell people when you're starting a company, one of your most valued advisors is your lawyer. And yes, they're important because of the legal advice they give you in employment contracts and financings and M&A and whatever else. But more importantly, they just have been through so many more startups than you'll ever go through unless you're also a lawyer, that they can offer you advice on just about everything that comes up and help you see, oh, well, the last 12 times we've done this, here's what we've done for the cap on the convertible note or whatever it might be. So get yourself a great lawyer. The team over at Orrick is fantastic. You can find out more at orrick.com. I also want to thank our TV studio. So we record this show every week out of KMVT 15 in Mountain View. And it's a local nonprofit community media center here in Mountain View where you can sign up and take classes and learn more about video and audio production. They have great summer camps for kids with claymation and learning how to do TV shows. And so we love the fact that we're here helping out and supporting this great community resource. And they're currently doing a fundraising campaign. It's called the Go Digital campaign. And you can imagine, as a nonprofit, they can't just go out and use their venture capital dollars and go buy all the latest equipment. So they rely on the support of their sponsors, as well as the revenue that comes in and donations. So if you're so inclined and you want to support the show, please go to kmvt15.org and donate. The money will go directly to supporting the programs here, as well as buying the latest equipment so they can continue to upgrade. As technology evolves, there's always a need for more digital stuff as time goes on. So that's kmvt15.org. So now it's time for the Ask the Lawyer segment. So I mentioned Mitch Zuklie from Orrick, who has been with us from day one on the show, and every week we try and go through a legal topic, and Mitch gives a little perspective, and then we have a little chat about it. So Mitch, are you with us today?
Yep, good to talk with you, Joe.
Hey, it sounds like you might even be in the United States this week. How you doing?
Thrilled to be right here in Silicon Valley.
All right, great. Well, today I thought a great topic would be universities and entrepreneurship. You know something about both of those. So, Mitch, I think one of the things that comes up when companies are getting started is, especially if they're in a university setting, is like, what do I need to do? And obviously, there have been some great companies. Yahoo and Google have both come out of Stanford, lots of MIT and other university startups. So, if you're a student at a university and you have an idea for the next Thunder Lizard that Ann is going to fund, what sorts of things do these student entrepreneurs need to think about as they're getting started with their company?
It is, but you can work with that university to license the tech. But that's the first thing. And particularly if you've worked in a lab and an idea comes to you while you're working in a lab with computer resources, there's a really good shot that the university owns it. So first thing, very very simple to deal with. Any lawyer can help you work your way through that. And many universities have very well developed licensing programs like those at Stanford that can be helpful. The second thing to think about is whether the time is right and you've got the right skill set really to execute on the idea. In general, and this is not a legal view, it's just kind of a life perspective. The one thing I hear time and time again from founders I've worked with, particularly those who've had a successful run at a company, is, gosh, if I knew today how hard it would have been, I'm not sure I would have started the company. And but I'm glad I did. And I think that what that conclusion or that comment, which I hear time and time again, leads me to believe is that actually there's a huge advantage to starting a company when you're young, when you don't have all the answers, when it's novel, when you're hungry, when you're filled with youthful exuberance and passion, and when, frankly, you're not as jaded and maybe a little bit more ignorant about how hard something is going to do. If you're about to attempt something that's got a 2% chance of success, you're probably better inclined to do that earlier in your life than you are later in your life, when you've got a mortgage and bills and kids to worry about and stuff like that. So I'm a huge believer that the best time, there's no perfect time to start a startup, and when you've got some passion around it, you should go. And so we've seen an increasing number of startups get founded by kids that are in school. And I think that, look at companies like Looped and stuff like that. There's an awful lot of them that have been very successful with very young founders. So aside from that special issue around making sure that the university doesn't own the IP, I think it's really just a question of getting going. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, you've seen this from both sides. So, what do you say? You know, you just mentioned that company with the Stanford PhD student who came to you. So, what do you tell these founders? What advice would you give them?
So usually, you know, there's two different types of companies I see coming out of places, especially like Stanford. One is the one where you have a PhD student who's working on technology that's been under development for 25 years with his advisor. And it's basically weapons grade plutonium, right? and when you look at it, you know that it's extraordinarily defensible. There's something really special there. And the question is there a problem that it solves?
Yeah.
Right. And so in that case, I spend a lot of time working with students to figure out if the market is big enough, right? And what is the solution? And what's the problem that they're going to attack?
Yeah.
And that can take a long time to even figure out
Sure.
and elicit. The other half is, you know, it's a cool problem. It's a cool product that they've been able to build up. And the question oftentimes there for students that I have is, again, it comes back to this: is this a big enough problem? Is more often than not, I'm asking them, is this a good enough problem for you to be solving? Right? Is this a good use of your time?
Yeah.
Right? And yet another iPhone app, right, that doesn't really do anything for society. Is that really where you want to spend your time, where it doesn't have a ton of traction, but you believe that it's going to get traction in the future?
Yeah.
Is that really the time to drop out of your university? And so I have a lot of dialogues with students around, is this idea truly good enough for you? And those are two, sort of building upon some of the ideas that were brought up before, those are two things that I often spend a lot of time talking to students about.
Awesome. Well, Mitch, that's very helpful. Thanks for the advice, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Joe. Appreciate it, Heidi. Have a good rest of the segment.
All right, see ya. Heidi, where did that come from? I don't know. He's in a time warp.
Last week.
Poor Mitch. Mitch never sleeps, so we're gonna excuse him from that. It was always amazing. Like whenever I would get in touch with Mitch, he'd be awake, and it turned out, you know, we did a show. Oh, he's in Rome, and it's 3 a.m, and he's like live on the thing. Then he was in Hong Kong, and I'm just like, do you ever? He's like, no, I usually just go over there. I don't go to bed. I'm just like, I don't know how you do it, but anyway. Thank you, Mitch. Great to have you as always. Let's get back to answering some questions. Again, it's 844-4FOUNDER. Email is help@founderline.com, and Twitter is @founderline. So we have an email here from Steve. If the company that I'm working at does a bridge loan, what does it mean? Do they have to tell their employees when they do a bridge loan?
When they receive a bridge loan,
yeah,
I assume.
Yeah, I guess.
No, you know, usually the communication between the CEO and the employees around what happens in terms of financing is really up to the CEO. And I haven't seen a universal policy on what exactly happens. I would say most of the time, in fact, financing is generally kept strictly amongst the executives. And so it's not unusual for the employees not to know, and yet at the same time, I'm starting to see more of a trend towards transparency too.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've seen more and more CEOs communicating what's happening with financing more openly with their employees.
Yep, makes sense. Well, and you know, I think what Steve might be getting at is a bridge loan can be a sign that something bad is happening, right? Like we haven't been able to raise the round, or we're running out of money, or whatever.
Yeah, but I think there's lots of different reasons why that happens, and so it's not just sort of a general negative signal. In fact, for some of our really, really great companies, we will actually come in and, offer them a little bit more capital, because we know that if they have that additional capital and they're on this acceleration curve, they can get up higher up that curve before they have to go out for a fundraise. And that means that they're going to have, higher valuation and lower dilution, and it's sort of everybody wins scenario.
Yep.
So it's not always negative, and so I wouldn't take it as a universal negative signal.
Great. And Steve, I would encourage you, if you're concerned about it, talk to, your executive team. Like, they may not be able to answer the question like, are we getting bought by Google tomorrow? That kind of stuff. But something like this, hopefully, they set it up well and they have a conversation around, well, here's why we decided to do this, because Ann came to us and thought this would help accelerate our growth or whatever it might be. So good luck with that. We have another email here from Will. How does Floodgate make decisions on investments? Is it everyone agreeing or just one person can do the investment?
Oh, so this is a great question. Actually, one person can do the investment. And in fact, some of our best deals are the ones where one of us thought it was just totally crazy. And what I like is because we have a 2-person investment partnership, we actually have a lot of disagreements, and we can actually communicate very openly with each other as to what we're disagreeing about and what we think are potential pitfalls for an investment. And so in a lot of cases, Mike will say, I just don't really understand it. And so it's sort of up to you to make the call. Particularly in my consumer investments where they've been more fashion oriented, that he'll just throw up his hands and say, I'm not going to say anything here, and I'm just going to allow you to make the decision. And I'll meet with the founder, but I'll try not to mess it up for you.
So you're saying Mike has no fashion sense? Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. He says he doesn't understand the business model. But what the process for us is fairly simple. One of us will meet with a company, and if we think it's really interesting, we will then open it up to another meeting with Mike, with the other partner.
Yep.
And once you've met with the 2 of us, that's basically you've gone through the partnership meeting. And the 2 of us will circle up and then figure out of all the companies that we've looked at within that week, which ones do we want to move forward with in terms of due diligence? What will that actually look like? What are the key risks that we think we're facing? And then we'll just come back to the founders with, here's our feedback, here's our thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to be a little bit more nimble with 2 partners than you don't have the big conference room with 20 chairs around it and have them get up there and present to the partnership.
We can never be very intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so this one is an email from Nicole. I'm having a disagreement with one of my investors over where to take our company, parentheses, strategy-wise. Any suggestions on how to best navigate this?
And I think, that's such an important question, right? And it has a lot to do with the underlying dynamics between an investor and the founder.
Yep.
Ultimately, the CEO is the CEO. The investor is there to provide capital. And if the CEO continues to do his or her job, which is essentially not run out of cash and continue to build a great team, then the CEO has the power to make controversial decisions. The place where that can get hairy is if you're running out of cash and you're very much dependent on the investor. That said, the functional relationship between the investor and the CEO is that the CEO really knows the details of the business and why they're taking a business in a certain direction or not.
Right.
And I fundamentally believe that our best founders are ones where we can have the open dialogue of, I'll say, this is the direction I think your business should go in. And the founder will very openly say to me, I think that's wrong. But here are the reasons why I think that's wrong. And those founders who have that internal compass and they know where due north is, that's incredibly important to the investor.
Sure.
Because I, as the investor, I'm coming in for a board meeting every 4 to 6 weeks. And I just know what I've been told or what I've managed to find out. But I don't know the whole picture, and I know that. right? And so,
but you're a good investor, right? There are others who may not be, quite as not deferring, but you know what I mean, reasonable in their approach. Like, well, you spend every hour every day working on this. I come in every 4 to 6 weeks and I keep up to date. But sometimes, I don't know if this is the case, but sometimes these disagreements do occur, right?
Right.
So,
and I think that the dialogue around why, understanding what the motivations of the investor are, and this goes back to when you're receiving financing, you do have to understand, are they investing in your vision, or are they investing in their vision of what you can become? and you really have to get to the bottom of that before you receive that investment.
Yep.
And because if they're investing in their vision and you don't deliver upon that promise, you can have huge disagreements, and it could be very, very dysfunctional.
Yes.
But if you're at least aligned in the early days and you go through the journey together and you bring your investors up to speed on why you're making decisions the way that you are, you can maintain that kind of functional relationship.
Great.
Again, it's totally dependent on personalities.
Yep. Well, I've worked with both, Nicole, and there are great investors, and to use sort of geeky terms, I call them energy sources and energy sinks, right? And energy sources are wind at your back, giving you great advice, sometimes disagreeing with you, but always being positive about it.
Right.
Energy sinks are, giving you assignments that, may not be useful.
Rock fetches.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I would, if I were you, I would just be very candid with this investor, maybe bring some other investors in as well, and have the dialogue. It's hard to tell with this little information how many investors there are, all those sorts of things. But
one thing I would add to that, though, is I think the benefit of being an outside investor and coming in occasionally is that there are moments in time where you as an investor will know sort of a fundamental truth about a business before the founder really sees it.
Yeah.
Right? And
which is a hard moment, right?
It's a very hard moment, and it's the investor's job to be right about that fundamental truth. If you're wrong, it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
But also to have a functional enough relationship with the founder that you can have conversations about that controversial topic.
Yep.
Right? And you want to have that kind of relationship with your investor. And as an investor, I want to have that with the founders as well.
Sounds good. So hope that helps, Nicole. Good luck with that. So we have an email here from Ruben. It says, you invested in Business Connect China, which is based in Shanghai. Whoops, it moved. Is that true?
That's true.
Oh, yeah. So as a seed company, how do you provide great service to a company so far away? So I don't know if that's your investment or Mike's.
It's Mike's investment. And actually, we have fairly regular board meetings with them. I think that's a really good question. It's actually the only investment we've made in China. And so it's something that honestly is probably one of the reasons we don't do very many foreign investments, right? In fact, there's only 2 that we've ever done. We have to have a very high level of trust with the entrepreneur. But also be able to, have emails dropped into us on any given moment and just, here's the question, here's what I need to get answers on, and then be able to sort of provide that on the fly. So it's not us coming by your office and providing, bespoke services, but rather we're sort of the ears on the ground here in Silicon Valley. And, both of the companies that are investments outside of the U.S. have on-the-ground investors in their geographies.
Okay. And was this a case where you knew the founders already, or it was a...
No, it was an area that we were really interested in.
Oh,
and
wow.
We got to know the founders and decided to make an investment.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Ruben. Let's see. We've got email here from Wilson. How much reference checking do you do before making an investment?
So we definitely ask for references, and that's one of the parts of our due diligence. We also do a background check.
Oh, really?
So what I would say is, for us, the major investment at the stage that we're investing in is the person, right? And so the background check is just, are they a criminal? And that's actually after we give them a term sheet. We just sort of have to do that because if something were to come up, we wouldn't be able to look our LPs in the eyes. But the most important piece is to find out from people who've worked with these people in the past, what are they like, you know, what strengths do they have? But more importantly, what I like to find out is where can I be of help? What are their blind spots? Yeah. And so oftentimes it's talking to people who've worked with these founders before to really understand what's the best way to provide feedback and to provide that sort of open line of communication.
Great. So I have to ask, how many situations where you gave the term sheet and then you did the background check and you discovered there was something wrong?
We found nothing.
Never.
Everyone's always like clean as a whistle.
That's great. Yeah, that's I mean, I'd imagine I've been background checked without. Do you tell them you're doing the background check?
No, because we have to ask them for Social Security and whatnot. So we always tell them. We always tell them.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I don't think anyone's ever asked me for my Social Security number. So good thing, right?
There you go.
All right, so we have another email here from Amy. Who are some of the best investors you've ever worked with? Other than Mike, of course.
No, I was going to say it's Mike.
Yeah. And I know that's kind of putting you on the spot, but I figured we ask it anyway.
Yeah, who are some of the people, so one of the guys that I worked with a long time ago at Charles River Ventures is Ted Dintersmith.
Okay.
And
in Boston.
In Boston. And he's just been an amazing person to observe in board meetings. I've always found him to be honest, and he always has the right insight at the right moment. And so I've always loved observing him. Another person who's actually been a great mentor to me as an investor is Kevin Compton, who was at Kleiner Perkins a while ago, is also at Radar Partners now. Yeah. But because he's seen all these different cycles, it's just always really great to get his advice on how I'm operating, how I could be better. Another person that I haven't worked with on any particular investment, but is a lecturer, and I've seen him in MS&E 273, is Zandi Rockcliff. And I just admire him because not only some of his frameworks around how to think about investments just feels really right to me, but also he was very courageous in becoming a CEO founder, right? And so taking Wealthfront through that pivot and making a successful business, there aren't many investors who've been able to do that. And so I really admire that as well. Yeah,
really impressive. In fact, I remember seeing him in action at a MS&E 273, like the final presentations.
Yeah.
And the questions were just like amazing, like really, and you don't have that much time, but no, he's a great guy, and obviously one of the rare VCs who's crossed back over and done a startup, and then got the hell out right when he handed it over, so he can relax a little bit more. So I know he's still very actively involved in Wealthfront, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so great guys. All right, so let's see. This one is from Ted. What is the number one reason startups fail? And how do you avoid that issue?
I think it's the number one is they run out of cash, right? People say, oh, it's not product market fit, it's all these other things. Well, it's you ran out of cash. And I think that, one of the symptoms of the problem is the market wasn't big enough, or the product didn't meet that market, or the timing was off.
Yeah. So how do you avoid running out of cash?
You raise cash. You convince investors to provide you with cash.
Yeah.
You're also capital efficient, right? And I think this is something that, especially in an economy where cash feels very flush.
Yes. Like right now.
I think that operating in a way that your business model fundamentally makes sense for the long term is really important. So free is not a business model, right? And some people think it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
You can't just blindly acquire customers at any cost to fund your growth. I just think that you have to keep your eye on whether or not you're building a truly legendary company that will be able to last for 30, 50, 75 years. And if you look at your business through that lens and you don't see yourself being able to do that with this current business model, you need to fix it.
Yep. Great question, Ted. Good luck. Hope that helps. I think we have time for one more here, and we're going to go to Tamir, who asks, do we need a board of directors at the seed round? What are the pros and cons? So I don't know. I believe you guys, do you always take a seat on the board, or sometimes, not all the time?
I take the board seat most of the time. And the reason that I end up doing that is I've been asked to do that because I'll spend more time with those companies. If I have a regular sort of every 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to get together and hear the things that we're going to review.
Yep.
And I only have certain number of slots that I can really take on for board seats. And so those companies naturally get more of my attention. And so do seed companies need a board? I would say that they don't necessarily need a board, but they need someone who's a lead investor, right? Yep. And what that means is that there's someone who's in charge of that round as an investor, who when things aren't going well, will lead the charge in trying to help raise additional financing or help you figure things out. You just want someone who's minding the shop.
Yeah.
And so I think that the board meeting actually looks very different at the seed stage. It's not 3 hours long. We're not doing audit committee. We're not doing compensation reviews. It's really focused around what are the core 1 to 2 questions that we need to be asking about the business, and how do you make forward progress on those two questions. And then just helping out, right? So rolling up your sleeves and trying to find additional people for them, or when they're asking for ideas around partnerships, being able to come through with concrete ideas. So I think of it as more of a real partnership at that stage.
Great. Well, we are out of time. Thank you for joining us. You were awesome. You can find Ann on Twitter. Is this Animaniac? Is that how you pronounce that?
Animaniac.
Animaniac. All right. So
like a cartoon show.
ANNIMANIAC. So you can find her on Twitter there. Send her some tweets, Hong, if you want to ask her about thunder lizards. We are off next week, but 2 weeks from now will be our next show, and our guest will be Manu Kumar from K9 Ventures. Manu's a great guy, and he's been both on the entrepreneur side as well as an investor in a bunch of interesting companies, Twilio, Lytro, Zimride, which is now Lyft.
We did that together.
Great. So it'll be another fantastic show. That's Thursday, the 11th of September, also known as 9/11, at 5 o'clock Pacific time. Thank you once again to our amazing sponsors, Orrick and Ustream. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. The handle is @FounderLine. You can send us questions for Manu at help@founderline.com. We'll get those in advance and be ready for that. And you can also go to our website, founderline.com, and you can find out the upcoming guests. You can watch videos from the previous shows. And you can also subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Thanks for watching. Here's to the crazy ones, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.